My mom and dad met back in the 80s. They were an interracial couple, and I think that I know my dad loved my mother, and I believe my mother, I think she cared for him, but she really struggled with someone really loving her. And I think because of the abuse she had been through, that it came off as a weakness to her. So even though my dad really loved her and cared for her, her heart left him when he had to go out of the country, and she ended up going back to my brother's dad. But before all of that, of course, she was pregnant with me, and I guess it wasn't the easiest pregnancy, and so she ended up actually having me early. I was 7.5 months when I was born, and my dad was, like I said, he had left the country for 4 months, and this really upset my mother, and she just kind of, I think, lost respect for him after that. Anyhow, I believe that this created a detachment when I was born, that she was embarrassed that I was so white, and it was like she looked at me like everyone was judging her, including my brother's dad, who would make fun of her basically and put her down for having a white baby. And so I never got that chance to bond with my mother the way that a child should be able to bond. It even interfered with my development. I crawled late, I walked late, I did a lot of things late because of the lack of love, I guess. Of course, I got older and I had family members that gave me unconditional love, and they kind of were the rainbow in my life. And I still loved my mother, I still loved her. I understood. I never judged her because of it. I just loved her regardless. It didn't even matter, because that's what love is. I grew up, got older. We moved to the suburbs, and my mother went through depression. And we ended up going into foster care because of it. And that was hard because I was lacking both of my parents. While my mother fought to get us back as best as she could, she did her best to try to give us a life. She did her best, she basically got us a house, and she just worked with what she had. And I always love her for that and appreciate her for that, because she struggled mentally with things she went through as a child. A lot of abandonment and neglect and abuse and other things, but I won't go into detail. But she was fighting, her own battle in life, and still trying to be a mother and trying to present to the world what she thought they wanted, but she still struggled in a lot of ways. She wanted to have fun. She wanted to hang out with her friends, and because she was isolated, it's like it really wore down on her mental health. But I saw her go through, churches and praying and just doing her best to hold on and figure out this life, Holidays, birthdays, she would do her best. We would have at least a Christmas tree, and birthdays, she would throw like a surprise party, and she loved us the best that she could, me and my oldest brother. We went through a lot, but she still tried. She didn't really have an example to go off of. She tried to learn as best as she could, but she was still a kid. She wasn't even 20 yet. So it was all very new to her and very rough. It wasn't an easy thing to do, to take care of children alone and really not much support. I mean, she did get some support from my dad, and I'll always respect him for that. And my grandmother helped her a lot, when she needed it. And we loved her. It didn't matter to us. We loved our mother. None of that stuff, material things, none of that stuff mattered to us. She was the apple of my eye. I mean, me and my brothers, we loved her. We loved her just for who she was. It didn't matter. We just wanted to be with her. That's what made us complete as children, is to be with her. And to see her happy and to see her mentally healthy was very important. I grew up, became a teenager. We moved out of the city to the suburbs. So my friends were like my world. They were my escape from the reality that I was living in. They basically made a lot of things better for me. Like, I would eat with them, I would hang with them. We talked about everything. We loved each other very much. And I still love all of them to this day, regardless of where we all are in life. I still care for them very much, and I hope that they're all doing well. They always seem to have these perfect families that, loving parents and healthy meals and taken care of. And, it gave me kind of an example to look at of a healthy home and a healthy family. And these were things that, of course, I love my family, but they were like new families. Like, I had become a part of each of their families. So when I was over their homes, they would treat me like family. It was no difference between me and their children. They pretty much, welcomed me to dinner, welcomed me to family events. And I loved it. And I loved them. And I still love them to this day. I needed that. And they were very hospitable to me. And I'll always remember that and appreciate that from all of them. I saw healthy dads, healthy moms, and, I seen how calm the children were and how well behaved the households were. And it just gave me a place to just relax and rest. And I grew up, went out of school, and decided, that I wanted to have a baby, because I felt like if I have a baby, that this baby would love me unconditionally and I would love my baby unconditionally, and my baby would never leave me and I would never leave my baby, and this baby was going to answer that void that I had within myself. And I did have a son, and he was everything to me. And eventually, at one point, we were homeless, which was very hard for me because, nobody would take me in. Nobody. Like, I was literally left out there in the cold. I didn't understand how, just because I had a child, why do these people all of a sudden don't like me anymore? Why do they hate me? Why is this happening to me? I was very devastated. It was like I felt invisible. I felt like my eyes were screaming out for help, but I couldn't open my mouth and say it. I just expected someone to know and to help, but nobody did. Nobody cared. We slept in vacant apartments, and it was rough, My uncle's girlfriend at the time ended up giving me a job, but eventually I got tired of my kid's dad beating on me, so I left and moved. I moved out of state, and didn't know anybody. I was 19, and a friend of mine knew I was struggling and said, hey, I know this girl, she makes a lot of money dancing. And of course, in my mind, I'm like, I would never do that. But I was so broke and destitute that it kind of opened that door for me to be able to provide financially for me and my son. But it was a sad place to be in. It was a place that I never imagined for myself. Like, I remember just thinking about, how did I end up here in life? I remember being so innocent and pure, and now look at me, all dirty and filthy. And a lot of times I would sit back and just, go into deep thought about this stuff. And it was hard for me to wrap my mind about how my life got where it was at. And I saw these people around me that looked happy, and I just didn't understand what pleasure they were getting out of all of this. I was in a lot of turmoil, and I was miserable. I was extremely lonely. I had been in a lot of abusive relationships, and abused, and I just wanted someone to love me. I just wanted someone to love me unconditionally, exactly for me, and to feel adored and to feel treasured. And these men, they would make me feel like that for a time, but then, they would give me the worst abuse. In the meantime, I was making good money, a decent amount of money. And that kind of filled a bit of a void as far as just not being broke. I could eat what I want. I could shop. I could buy myself cute clothes and do my hair. And of course, I had to pay them, because you can't work anywhere for free. They got their portion and I got my portion. But again, it was just never a lifestyle that I ever planned for myself. That was the last thing I ever thought I would ever do with my life. But I was, like I said, I left an abusive relationship. I was being beaten and even with all that money, I was lonely. I was very lonely. And I just felt like I was on the wrong road. I began to realize that something isn't right. I would hear the Lord speak to me and tell me that the road to destruction is wide and broad, and it moves fast, and it doesn't take long to go over the edge. And I could feel like the walls kind of closing in on me. It felt like, where's my life headed? What am I going to do?